Welcome to the review of the Oregon Trail. It was created in 1971 by 3 developers and was actually produced by MECC, or the Minnesota Educational Computing Consortium, in 1974. The version I'm going to be reviewing is a 1990 release for DOS. It is similar to the original game, except it has updated graphics. It can work with VGA adapters and have up to 256 colors. Although for the most part, from what I've seen, it looks more like EGA graphics. The game is educational in the fact that it tries to teach students the 19th century pioneer life on the Oregon Trail. So you begin as a wagon leader and you guide a party of settlers from Independence, Missouri. The goal is to reach Willamette Valley and try to achieve as many points as possible. The game is filled with all kinds of random events that can happen, good and bad, during the game. Keep in mind that I'm going to be rating this based on its release in 1990 for this particular version. I am not rating based on the original 1971/1974 release. So you're presented with the main menu once the game begins, and you can take a look at a high score list, which I'm sure was fantastic in the day when you're competing with other students trying to see who can do better. It tells you how you score based on the health of your party when you arrive in Willamette Valley. Also, you get points based on the types of resources you have. For example, per wagon, which I'm not sure if you can have more than one, you get 50. For each ox you get 4, etc. And a really big factor in your game is based on the occupation you choose at the beginning. And you have a choice of 3. You can either be a banker, a carpenter, or a farmer. Essentially, it determines how much money you begin with. It has a management options menu, which allows you to manipulate a lot of different things in the game. But we're going to begin traveling. So of course the banker gets the most money, so they're the easiest to play. So anyone wanting to play this, I recommend starting as the banker. And then you begin to name your party. You have 5 members. You type in their name, and then you choose which month you will be leaving. This determines many different factors, such as random events, and if you're going to end up getting bogged down in mud, if the oxen's going to run out of food, etc. The game does have a lot of helpful hints, which is fantastic, because remember, this is geared toward students, educational, so they may not be aware of certain facts. So as the banker, you begin with $1,600, and you start shopping at Match General Store. This same graphic is used for every shop during the game, but he fixes you up with food, ammunition if you want to do hunting, spare parts, etc. So he is actually the cheapest storekeeper during the game. Everywhere else where you shop will be more expensive. So you simply type in a number of how many yokes you want, and in turn you get the number of oxen times 2. Next is to shop for food, which of course is important so that you don't starve and that you don't have health issues. You also need to purchase clothing, and incidentally you'll find out later that you can trade with random people throughout the game, so sometimes having extras can be a little lucrative. As I mentioned, you can hunt during the game to get food, so you need ammunition if you're going to purchase some of that. And you'll need spare parts for your wagon in case things break, which do seem to happen quite often. You have the ability to buy wheels, axles, and tongues. You are limited to only buying 3 of each, however. And then the game begins as it plays Yankee Doodle Dandy. Next, you have the ability to look at an overhead view or map of the Oregon Trail. So you can see where you're starting in Independence, Missouri and where you're trying to reach in Oregon. Every town or location you visit has the same menu, where you can check your supplies to see how many you have left. You can talk to people, which sometimes will give you good advice and other times it's just kind of an educational random message. And depending on which town you're in, some may actually trigger different events, such as being able to take a ferry, cross a river, or have an Indian help you cross. But again, there's a lot of history lessons. You can also buy supplies in each town, and the cost goes up because of supply and demand, so you're much better off buying in the beginning. You can change the distribution rate for rations, and that tremendously affects your health as you travel. You can also change the walking pace, which once again has an impact on the health, but it also impacts how quickly you're going to get there. The help explains to you the side effects or potential risks for changing different things such as rations and your walking pace. But as you begin traveling, you're presented with nice little animations, simple and crude, but fun for an educational game. Toward the top it shows that, and toward the bottom it gives information about how far you've traveled, how many miles to the next landmark, and your health. Anytime you can press enter to size up situation and change any of your statuses or states. So once you reach the next area, you can choose yes to walk around. You're presented with nice little graphics and PC speaker sound. Just to show you the graphics, here's a comparison of CGA on the left versus VGA on the right. And from zoomed out it actually looks fairly similar, but as you zoom in you can realize that the CGA is using dithering to give the illusion of more colors than what it really has. So as you travel, you'll notice when you look at the map it has filled in the dotted lines to become solid the further along the trail. Eventually in towns you'll want to rest based on your health, and it will normally improve your health. For example, here our health says fair, so I rest for 7 days and then our health becomes good. However, I did find some weird situations where I would rest and my health would get worse. So here it goes from fair to poor. So I thought, okay, well, let me rest again. Because after all, resting is good. However, now Carolyn has typhoid. So I thought, well, maybe I rest again and that will cure that. Let's just try 2 days. And all of a sudden Laura has exhaustion and Carolyn has died. So what the heck is going on here? Let's try to rest a longer period. Nope, Edwards has a fever. Edwards has died. So I'm not sure if this is a bug in this particular version, but I did find times in which resting just causes you to get more illnesses and die. So eventually, once you make it to different places, most of them have rivers that you must cross. It tells you how wide the river is and how deep, and it gives you options on how to get across. The default, or probably the most common way, is to attempt to ford the river, which is pressing the number 1. It shows a nice little animation of your wagon and oxen going across the river. And dependent, of course, on the depth and the width, determines your success rate. Here, this river is only 223 feet wide and 1.5 feet deep. So fording is more likely to be successful. It's muddy, but we did not get stuck. You can wait, and sometimes that has a positive effect on the width and depth of the river. You can caulk your wagon and try to float it across, but sometimes it'll flip over and you'll lose things. This is so funny to me how matter of fact this is. You lose wagon wheels, tongue, food, Mary drowned. Oh, let's just throw Mary drowned right in there as things you lost. So this river was actually 20.2 feet deep. And in a case such as this, you definitely want to pay a ferry to get across. You lose a little bit of time because it's slower, but it's by far worth it compared to the risk. There's also times where you can have Indians help you across, and that seems to increase your success rate tremendously. So as you travel, the weather changes based on the date, of course, and sometimes you'll have storms or the grass will change based on the date, so that's lots of fun. So here, for example, it shows the grass change from being green in May to a tan color, indicating that there's not that much grass. In fact, if there is light grass, sometimes you'll get a message such as that says inadequate. You can lose days by oxen wandering off, or severe thunderstorms, heavy fog. There's all kinds of random events. Sometimes you can lose up to 4 days if you choose the wrong trail, or if one of your party members gets lost. Sometimes they'll say rough trail, which I'm not really sure what that means. Sometimes your oxen can be injured, and eventually oxen can die. You can have broken equipment such as a wagon tongue needing repair, which incidentally, if you repair it, you don't have to replace it with a spare part. If your repair fails, then that's when a spare part is used up. You can have bad water, which affects the oxen, or very little water. There's many different illnesses or diseases you can get, which again is great for an educational game because students can learn the types of illnesses people got back then. You can break a leg, which ends up spelling disaster eventually, because usually that party member will end up dying. You can also find good things such as abandoned wagons where you can get extra equipment. And it's pretty random with what you find, but sometimes the wagons will actually be empty as well. You can find wild fruit to boost your food supply, and you can find some random things like a grave site. Hey, 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 come out and play. What the heck? So as you reach the different landmarks, you're presented with pretty little graphics, nice little PC speaker sounds. Gives you a nice little feel that you're actually in 1848. So once you are at different places, as I mentioned, you can try to trade with different people. Here's an immigrant who wants 1 wagon tongue and he'll give you 34 pounds of food. And it seems pretty random with what they will want to trade. And you can try a few times at each place, and then eventually it'll tell you that no one wants to trade today. But one of the most fun aspects of this game is hunting. It turns it into an action game, and I'm sure all the students loved this part. So you position your hunter by pressing keys on the keyboard and then a fire key in order to fire. And of course the animals just run around on the screen wildly as you shoot at them. And there are terrain blockages such as those plants that you can see toward the middle and left side of the screen there. You can fire as many shots as you have bullets, of course, and the hunting actually ends after just a short period of time. Afterwards you're told how much meat you scored. Also during the game you'll eventually run into forks where you have a choice, and you can either, for example here, cross Green River, or we can go Fort Badger route. You can take a look at the map before you decide, and then make your choice. Here we have a choice whether we want to float down the Columbia River or take the Barlow Toll Road. So I choose to float down the Columbia River, which also presents another mini game. This is the only other action sequence in the game. So it gives you instructions on what you're supposed to do. And you begin floating. I'm going to speed up part of this process because it does take a couple minutes to get through it. But as you can see, you start to float and you have to push the key to stop it from going in one direction. Otherwise it'll keep going until it hits something. Of course, you're trying to avoid these rocks, and eventually you make it to the third flag and go past it until you see some squiggly lines which indicate it's time to pull ashore. And at this point, you've won the game. And then you're presented with your score, and you can see if you made the top 10 list. If so, you get to put your name in, and you get to brag to all the other students around. You'll notice that the ratings have Trail Guides, Adventures, and Greenhorn as the potential ratings. So just one more quick thing I wanted to mention. For example, here if we start the game as a farmer, you only get $400. Much more difficult compared to the $1,600. There's a lot of replay value in this game because of the random events that happen, the different routes you can take, and trying to beat high scores. The game is full of helpful little hints or tips and education. The hunting scenes are a lot of fun. I even had some fun playing those. VGA graphics is pretty appealing for such a primitive game in this aspect. The terrain, of course, is random, which makes it fun because it blocks your bullets. The animals run around randomly into it and then back off. So overall, this game is a fantastic educational game. I hope you enjoyed this review of the Oregon Trail, and I'll see you next time.